Well, welcome to this special edition of the 700 Club. My father is in the studio today, and we'll be celebrating his 93rd birthday throughout the show. But first, in the news, today a Manhattan grand jury could deliver charges against former President Trump over his role in alleged hush money payments. Security forces in D.C. and Manhattan are preparing for possible protests if Trump is indicted. Charlene Aaron brings us the story.
Former President Trump is awaiting word whether he will be indicted on allegations of hush money payments made on his behalf during his 2016 presidential campaign. A Manhattan grand jury that has been hearing evidence in the case resumes today. If indicted, this will be the first criminal case against a former U.S. president. Law enforcement is bracing for demonstrations and possible violence as the former president called on supporters to protest if he's arrested. In Washington, fencing is back in place around the U.S. Capitol. In New York, police set up barricades outside the Manhattan Criminal Court as demonstrators on both sides gather in the city.
NYPD is doing their normal role of making sure that there's no inappropriate actions in the city.
Top Republicans are blasting the Manhattan DA's investigation into payments to a former adult film star over an alleged affair as purely political.
DOJ wouldn't take the case. Federal District of New York didn't take the case. Cy Vance wouldn't take the case. Bragg didn't want to take the case. And then what changed? President Trump announces he's running for president, and Shazam! We're gonna some bookkeeping error from 7 years ago is misdemeanor.
This comes amid new revelations in a separate investigation involving Trump's handling of classified documents. According to ABC News, a federal judge found that the special counsel investigating the case presented compelling preliminary evidence that Trump may have broken the law. The special counsel argued that the former president's attorneys should be forced to testify because Trump knowingly misled them to file a sworn statement that he knew was false. The statement certified that after a diligent search of Mar-a-Lago, the Trump team turned over all classified documents. When the FBI raided his home 2 months later, they found more than 100 additional classified documents. CBN chief political analyst David Brody recently weighed in on the issue of Trump's lawyer being ordered to violate attorney-client privilege on the 700 Club.
The prosecutors, Jack Smith and others, potentially think that there was some sort of crime committed in the discussions between Trump and the communications between Trump and his lawyer here, Evan Corcoran. So I think that's the issue here.
Meanwhile, the Secret Service and New York police are coordinating plans, including court security and potential surrender for booking in the event that the former president is indicted. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, this is certainly a momentous day. The possible indictment of a former president will have repercussions throughout our history, and it'll also have repercussions for the presidential race in 2024. We'll be following it, and you can get updates on cbnnews.com. In other news, 7 deputies and 3 hospital workers in Virginia are facing murder charges over the death of a man in their charge. John Jessup has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. John?
That is right, Gordon. The criminal charges stem from the death of 28-year-old Iva Otieno at a psychiatric hospital in Petersburg, Virginia, earlier this month. Prosecutors in the case released video of the incident Tuesday. It shows the deputies bringing Otieno into the hospital admissions area. A 10-minute struggle follows, with deputies and hospital staff seen on top of the victim attempting to restrain him. When he goes unconscious, medical workers tried to revive him without success. The chief medical officer determined he was smothered to death. Otieno's mother spoke out on the charges.
Those 10 monsters, those 10 criminals, I was happy to hear that they were indicted. And that is just the beginning step.
The family says Otieno battled mental health issues. His mother reportedly tried to get him medical help after police were called when he allegedly took some items from a neighbor's home. Attorneys for the defendants vowed to vigorously fight the charges. Well, an update now on the latest about COVID-19 and how it all started. President Biden signed into law a bill declassifying government intelligence on COVID's origins. The measure passed the Senate and House unanimously. Some scientists and government agencies believe COVID started in a lab and was somehow released to the public. Others say an animal spread the disease to people. The intelligence is set to be declassified within 90 days. Well, China's President Xi Jinping departed Moscow today after a 3-day visit with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. The two signing a number of economic agreements to create closer relationships in technology, energy, and trade. Xi also proposed a ceasefire in Ukraine, but it's a non-starter with Kyiv and the West because it does not include the withdrawal of Russian troops. The United States interpreting the trip as another move by Xi to make China a greater force on the world stage. Last month, China surprised the West by announcing it brokered a deal leading to a renewed diplomatic relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. While America turns its attention to the growing threat by China and Russia, there are concerns we're downgrading the threat of global terrorism. While a new report finds terrorist attacks declining in the West, terrorism is growing deadlier in the Middle East and Africa, where American interests are at stake. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke brings us that story.
In their annual report, the Institute of Economics and Peace finds that while the dynamics of terrorism are changing, the threat remains high. Experts warn that any kind of complacency, especially by world powers, could lead to serious consequences in the future.
Maintaining focus is really important despite all the competing priorities that are out there.
The Hudson Institute's Joshua Meservey points to the Biden administration's shifting focus away from the war on terror to pay attention to the growing concerns with China and Russia.
So it makes sense that there's been a pivot, but there is a danger there that we lose sight of these terrorist organizations that are still totally committed to attacking the United States, or if they can't hit the American homeland, would attack Americans or American interests in whatever region they're in.
This year's index indicates that Western counterterrorism efforts over the last 2 decades continue to pay off, showing a decline in attacks. Meservey points out, however, that doesn't mean terror organizations have been less active. They've just moved on to countries facing greater instability.
There has been a real shift to Africa, specifically the Sahel region, where we've seen a greater growth in terrorist activity than anywhere else in the world.
He notes that region of Africa faces frequent food shortages, poverty, and corrupt leadership.
There's an enabling environment that exists in these countries where you have kleptocratic, even abusive governments, and that helps the terrorists, frankly. It makes their ideology more attractive. It makes the message that they're sending to ordinary people more attractive.
The Islamic State remains the world's deadliest terror group for the 8th year in a row, with Afghanistan feeling the highest impact from terror attacks.
You have a terrorist organization that runs the country now, so it's really unsurprising, but it's also a reminder of just how badly the United States botched both the Afghanistan withdrawal and other elements of that war.
The IEP is calling on world powers to tackle terrorism by addressing systemic issues in places like Africa, where governments seem less likely to stamp out violent extremism and people appear more likely to be taken in by radical ideologies. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Caitlin. Now to Turkey, where the government is working hard to meet the needs of millions of earthquake victims. Sadly, some of these needy people are falling through the cracks. That's where CBN's Operation Blessing comes in. Dan Rainey shows us how even the smallest acts of service are making a huge difference in helping people survive.
Operation Blessing's medical team is here on the ground in Hatay, Turkey, serving a small community that's really been forgotten. Now, our doctors have been in touch with the Turkish Medical Association, a part of the government, and the government knows that this community is here, but their doctors are out serving big tent villages, places with hundreds, if not thousands of people in them. We're here in an area where there may be 20 or 30 tents and less than 100 people, but that's where Operation Blessing comes in. We're here treating some of the common things like cuts, scrapes, bruises, and the main thing we're seeing are intestinal issues, people with diarrhea, people vomiting, and that's largely due just to the lack of sanitation and hygiene out here. Now, we're giving people the medicine they need now, but we've also been delivering chlorine. Back at Operation Blessing headquarters, we have a chlorine-making machine set up. So we're able to take mass amounts of chlorine to communities like this one, so people can keep their dishes and serving utensils clean. We've also been delivering food and water. And today we were able to help a lady who had a tent, but she didn't know how to set it up and she couldn't find any help. So we helped her. These are the kinds of things that Operation Blessing is getting accomplished here for the people in Hatay, Turkey. And it's only possible because of the support of our donors. So we want to say thank you on behalf of all the people that we're here serving. You are changing lives for people in desperate need.
Thanks, Dad. Meeting needs both great and small. Gordon?
If you're part of the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, if you haven't given to it, I invite you to do it now. We want to be there for people in need in Turkey, for the refugees coming out of Ukraine, both inside Ukraine as well as in Poland. We want to help people in their time of need. If you want to donate, call us right now, 1-800-700-7000, or you can write to the CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Disaster Relief Fund on the outside of the envelope and on the memo line of a check. Or you can text OBDR to 71777. Either way, do it right now. Call us, 1-800-700-7000.